Hi, I am Deborah Hughes. I am a paranormal mystery author, and I am starting this blog to talk about the paranormal and mystical related phenomena. Each post will cover something different, be it spirit contact, the different forms of spirit contact, reincarnation, whatever. It's wide open what we can talk about. And a lot of them I will back them up with my own experiences in these issues, which has led me to believe what I believe. And so this post is about my ghost stories. What happened to me that has led me to believe that ghosts exist. What has led me to continue to explore the paranormal world, which when you start exploring it, it just opens you up to even more and more stuff. And it's like there's so much out there that we don't know. And there's a lot that we do know. And, we'll share and we'll discuss it and we'll see where this takes us. So anyway, this post is about my paranormal journey, my ghost story, and why I believe what I believe. And it started for me when I was 7, almost 8 years old. We moved into a haunted farmhouse out in the country. And I grew up in Bucksport, Maine. And it's a tiny little New England town with its own paranormal mystery with the town founder's ghost tombs monument in the grave near the grave where he's buried. He was supposedly cursed by a witch. So I grew up with that overshadowing our little town, and I love that mystery. And it turned out that the house that we moved into, this haunted old farmhouse, goes back to Jonathan Buck because his family members were original builders of the initial homestead on the property. So anyway, we moved into this place. It was very old. And my parents got a very good deal on it. $100 a month. Wouldn't that be great in today's day and age, huh? But anyway, back then, that was not that I'm that old, but it was just a few years ago. And they got a good deal on this property, but it was haunted. So who wants to live there? We did. And we moved. Behind the house was in just a little ways back in the field, and there's a little crop of trees around it, was a tomb. 12 people were buried in that tomb, and on the outside of the tomb, on the facing, their names and birth dates and the day they died was inscribed upon it. And there was, from babies, young children, young adults, all buried in there, which suggests tragedy, obviously. And when there's tragedy involved with a property, hauntings often happen. Not always, but often. Because there's a lot of energy stored in the property. Emotional energy gets stored into objects because we're energy beings. And everything around us is made of energy. And so when a tragedy happens, energy becomes stored in the objects around it. Homes, the ground, objects. And so it creates an atmosphere for paranormal activity. So anyway, we moved in, and right away we started noticing some phenomena in the house that we initially we just explained it away. Because when you first start encountering paranormal activity, you don't immediately go, well, some people might, but we didn't go like, oh my gosh, it's a ghost. We were like, well, first off, if things disappeared, which a lot of things did, parents thought me and my 3 brothers and my sister, I was the oldest, that maybe we had taken them. And so we got accused of misplacing a lot of things. But my 3 things that stick in my head that I want to mention really quick is the, I liked to, when I was a little bit older, I started baking. And I was babysitting. I started babysitting my siblings when I was about 12. And so I don't know, I was about 13, I think, when this happened. And I like to gather my ingredients around. And so anyway, I was going to make an apple pie. And my mom bought me a brand new can of cinnamon because I was going to make an apple pie. And that was my request. So I took I got them all my things, set my little can of cinnamon down that my mom had just got me. And a little argument or something broke out in the living room with my siblings. So I run to take care of that. And I come back to make my pie. Cinnamon is gone. I just set it right beside the bowl and it's gone. And so I knew that my brothers and my sister did not sneak in and take it because they were in the living room with me. So I looked all over. I got my siblings to help me out, and we never found that can of cinnamon. What does spirit need with cinnamon? I mean, where did it go? We shall never know. Maybe I'll find out when I cross over. I can say, hey, where did that cinnamon go? And what the heck did you do with it? So I just don't know. I can't explain it. Another thing was I took a picture of my grandparents, and which I spent a lot of time with them. I loved them so much, and it was very hard to get them in a picture together. And so I got a really good picture of them, and I decided, hey, I'm going to have a bunch of copies made and share this with the family. So I had just got them back, and I wanted to put them in a safe place until I could get them, sent out to the people that I was going to give them to. So my mom had a big antique dresser in her room with a big mirror on it. And so I took it upstairs in her room and I stuck the envelope of the pictures behind the mirror. Not long after that, like an hour or two, my grandfather came over to visit and I wanted to show him the picture. So I run back upstairs to get the envelope. Gone. It was gone. My mom came upstairs. We pulled that dresser apart. We pulled it away from the wall. We took the mirror off. We pulled the drawers out. Gone. Never found those pictures. Where did they go? What does spirit want with pictures? And why couldn't we have them? And that still bothers me to this day, that we lost those pictures. So, and then the third thing that really sticks in my mind was when I had a parakeet. And it was in the late winter time. I don't know, I think it was February, March time frame. My parents went to Florida, and the 5 of us kids got farmed out to family. And where I went, which was just up the road about a half a mile, she had 4 cats and wouldn't let me bring my bird. So my grandfather was, he said he was going to come to the house and take care of all my mom's plants. She had a lot. And he would feed and water my bird. And keep the heat going, because we had an oil stove, and that was the only way we heated the house. So anyway, my grandfather shows up a couple days after my mom and dad left, and he says, Debbie, the bird's gone. I thought he meant it flew away, and I was upset. And he's like, no, it's gone. The cage, it hung up from a hook on a stand. He said, it's all gone. So we went down there to help him look for the bird, because it made no sense. It was there the day before my parents left, and it was gone. The newspaper was still on the floor that we set the stand on, because birds are messy, and the whole cage is gone, stand and all. So we figure, well, Mom must have found someone to take the bird and just didn't tell us, because we didn't have cell phones. So anyway, and we couldn't call her and say, what did you do with my bird? So we had to wait until they came back from Florida. They were supposed to be gone about 10 days. They came back a little early. So, because there was some speculation, well, maybe somebody took it as a joke and then brought it back really quick, but nobody knew when my mom and dad were returning, so that blows that theory out the window. And my mom calls and says, we're home, Debbie can come back. And we went down, and I said, where's my bird? And she says, what do you mean? It's right here in the corner where it always is. So anyway, we went down there, and sure enough, there's my bird in the corner, hanging from his little hook, clean cage. And you know how messy birds can be, very messy, pulling feathers out and scattering seeds all over the place. Full water dish, full food dish, cage is clean, and hardly anything on the floor, on the newspaper. So it makes no sense. I mean, I guess Spirit was helping take care of the bird. I don't know. I appreciate it, but what a mystery that one is. And still surprises us to this day. So that's three major things that stick in my head, but there was a lot of stuff missing. My dad lost things that we just set down, and then we turned around to get it, gone. You know, and there's a lot of kids, you know, where's my thing? I just had it. We don't know. And, well, it didn't grow legs or wings and fly off or walk away. No, it didn't. Spirit took it. That's the only explanation. Because us kids didn't do it. So, anyway, we had a lot of those incidents, which created a lot of tension sometimes between us. Which, speaking of which, another phenomena that often happens in haunted houses is windows and doors opening on their own, and lights coming on and off, that kind of thing. And so, being the oldest in the family, there's a lot of times when, you know, I'd stay up a little bit later than everyone else, and so it was my job to turn the lights off, make sure the doors were secure for the night, which I always did because, you know, I didn't feel safe if I went to bed and the doors weren't secure. And turning those lights off was a major deal for me because now I'm plunged into darkness in a haunted house, and I got to run to my room. So it was a major deal. And then I would get accused of leaving the lights on because my dad would get up in the morning, lights are on, doors are wide open. And, you know, I would tell him, Dad, I made sure the doors were secure. I made sure the lights were off. But he didn't believe me because he saw the opposite. And then, you know, there was a couple of times where I was gone and Dad was the last one to go to bed. And it happened to him, and so now he realizes, okay, well, geez, all those times I was accusing Deb, and it looks like she was telling the truth. So he apologized, and we made up, and so that was nice. So anyway, there's those incidents, which happened a lot. Another incident, something that's peculiar to haunted houses is cold spots. And our house was always cold. Summertime, hot as heck outside, doors are open, windows are all open, you know, to let some of that heat in the house because it was always cold in our house. Always. But there was times when you would be moving through the house and you would just like move through a cold spot. So, now, if you're around the stoves, we had a big cast iron stove in the kitchen, and that kept the house warm. We had an oil stove in the living room, kept the living room warm. So those two rooms were the warmest rooms in the house. But you could move right by the stove and go through a cold spot. And they didn't stay in one place, they moved around. And, you know, that was a phenomenon we didn't understand. It's like, wow, what's causing that? And another thing was we had a little dog named Tippy. He was a Chihuahua Poodle mix. And this thing terrorized our poor little doggy. My best little buddy. I love Tippy so much. And Tippy would be curled up like in front of the stove, and all of a sudden he'd come awake like something just poked him, and he'd, you know, cry a little bit, and then he would track whatever was bothering him with his eyes. And then often he'd run and jump into my lap because he was my little buddy. And I'd keep him safe. And he'd be shivering and crying, and I couldn't see anything. And so, I mean, my dad thought the dog was crazy. He's like, that dog is crazy. Because, you know, my dad didn't believe in ghosts. And we came to understand that there was ghosts there, but Dad wasn't buying it, not at first. So anyway, the poor little Tippy got terrorized quite a bit. There were times when we'd go away, you know, visiting or wherever, and we'd come home and open the door, and Tippy would come running and just barreling out of the house, tail between his legs, and he's, and off he goes, hiding somewhere. And I have to go find him, coax him out, hold his shivering little body, and calm him down. And no explanation for what was causing Tippy to do that. And one incident was my aunt came over to visit my mom, and she was working, but she could hear Tippy crying in the house. And so the doors we didn't lock the doors. It's a country in Maine. And we secured him at night, but But during the day, the house wasn't locked. And my aunt went in to check on my dog to see why he was crying. He was completely tangled to the table and chair legs in the kitchen. I mean, just wound right up. And she went to try to get him, get him out, and he was so scared. He was growling at her, and so she didn't dare. And he was a friendliest, very non-aggressive dog. He knew my aunt very well. Never showed any aggression toward her, but he was just so terrified. He was terrified out of his poor little mind. And so she called my mom and said, "You need to come take care of your dog," which she did. And now, I want to say, people say, well, he was playing with the yarn, he got himself tangled up. How do you get yourself completely wound up? But the other thing is, Tippy never played with that yarn, ever. Even when my mom was doing her crocheting thing. Tippy didn't bother the yarn. He had zero interest in it. And my mom kept it in the closet, top shelf, with the door closed, because we did have cats that did like to play with the yarn. How it got knocked down from the shelf in the closet, we don't know. But that's another incident with poor little Tippy. And then there's one involving him that was especially terrifying to me. I walked home from school one day. I was about 13, and it was about 3 miles from school. And I walked home, and it was a really hot day. I was very thirsty, but I didn't go in that haunted house by myself. So when I got home, my mom wasn't home from work yet. Of course, the kids hadn't come yet either, because they were riding the bus and I had walked. So I opened the door, I let Tippy out, and we're sitting on the step, and he seems fine. So I'm like, well, if Tippy's okay, because he always knows when the spirit's around, it must be okay to go in the house, because I was so thirsty. So I was like, I'm going to be brave. I'm going in and I'm going to get myself a drink. So Tippy comes with me, and the house was cold. But again, he was trotting along with me. He seemed fine. So I thought, well, if he's fine, I'm fine. When we got into the kitchen, Tippy didn't go any further. I had to go into the pantry to get a drink. The pantry it was a little room off the kitchen where the sink was, and the refrigerator, and all the cupboards with food and dishes and stuff. And Tippy would never go in the pantry. He wouldn't go in there. And I was always scared. When I was in the pantry, I felt like something was in there with me, staring at me right over my shoulder. I mean, I'd go in there and I'm just like this, constantly looking over my shoulder. It was a creepy room to me, and I hated it. The entire time we lived there, I hated that pantry. And I had to do the dishes. I had to bribe my siblings, one of them, to come in there and stay with me and sit. I'd sit them on the counter next to the sink so they could watch my back, so I could feel safe while I'm washing dishes, because my little dog ain't coming in there with me. And so anyway, I was in the pantry getting a drink, and Tippy was in the kitchen area watching me, and all of a sudden he just launched into a series of growling and snarling, like something was attacking him or threatening him. So I turned and looked, and I was scared to death. And I couldn't see around the corner, but he was looking kind of in that direction. So, of course, I'm calling to him, but he's not paying no attention to me, because he's looking at whatever. And he's growling and snarling, and he's shaking, and his tail's between his legs, and his little toenails are tip-tapping on the floor, because he's going forward like he's charging it, and then he's retreating. And so finally he backed all the way underneath the kitchen table. And he's still barking at it and snarling at it. And he's looking up at the corner of the kitchen. So I know I have to look. I got to know what I'm up against. So I lean forward and I look. And there's a washer and dryer in that corner. Nothing else. Nothing. I saw nothing. But he did. And I didn't dare to leave the pantry that I was terrified of being in. I didn't dare to leave. I didn't dare to go out into the kitchen, because I didn't know whatever Tippy saw, was it going to attack me. So I begged him to come to me, and finally he wanted to, but he was scared. But he went all the way around the edge of the kitchen, behind this big old cast iron stove that we had. And when he got close enough, I leaned down, I stretched my arms out as far as I could, and he launched into my arms. And as soon as I had him, he turned right around and he's looking and he's growling at whatever. So using him as my eyes, I held him close to me but in front of me, so because he's my eyes. He can tell me where this thing is. So long as I know where it is, I know where I can go. So I back out, I come out of the pantry, and I'm holding him, and I'm turning so that we're facing it, because no way am I turning my back on this thing. And I'm backing out of the kitchen, and he's growling, and he's shivering, and he's whining, but he's not giving me an indication that this thing is following us or approaching us until we get into the hallway that leads to the front door. And I was about 4 feet from the door when all of a sudden Tippy just launched forward, and he acts like he's actually in combat with something. He's biting, and he's showing his teeth, and he's doing the little dog, and he's shaking his head. And I had a hard time holding on to his body, but he was whatever it was now right in front of us, and it was close enough that Tippy was trying to attack it. I think he was trying to protect me. And so anyway, I couldn't hold on to him, and I dropped him. And as soon as he hit the floor, I turned and I just booked it. And so did Tippy. And we just ran, we jumped over the steps, and we went running up the road. Tippy's coming with me the whole time. And I thought he was hurt, but when I couldn't run anymore and I collapsed side of the road, he jumps into my arms. He wasn't hurt, he was just scared. And so anyway, I sat there waiting for my mom. And finally she comes. My mom didn't drive at the time, and so a friend was giving her a ride home. And what does she do? She drives right by. Hey, Deb, And I'm like, oh, great. Now my mom's going to the house, and she's in there alone, and I have to go save her. So I ran home, and I'm yelling for her, and she comes to the door, and she's like, what? And I told her what happened, and she said, well, whatever it was, it's not here now. So there was those incidents. It's just a lot. There's so much I could tell you about. One other terrifying incident that happened to me was I was laying in my mom's room one day, laying on the bed reading, one evening. My parents were visiting with friends downstairs playing guitars, because they got together and played guitars and sang sometimes. Acoustic guitars. So, and I'm laying on the bed reading. My 3 brothers and my sister are in the other room playing. And the bed started shaking. So I put my book down, and I'm like, what the heck? And it stopped. So I start to read again, starts shaking again. So I put the book down. I'm like, why is the bed shaking? Maybe my brother is under the bed. So I'm like, Jeff? And he calls from the other room. What? Well, no. Well, because and then it had stopped again. And then I heard something rolling around on the floor. And I look over the edge of the bed, and a spool of thread was just rolling by all over. It was going all over the place. It would hit the wall, bounce off the wall, stop dead in its tracks for a second, and then take off, hit another wall, and roll, and either roll really fast, or it would slow down and roll really slow. It was the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen. It scared me to death. Finally, it rolled underneath the bed and stopped. And that's when the bed started shaking even more. And of course, I'm yelling for my siblings to come in, and they wouldn't come. They were playing, and they couldn't care less what was going on with me. So anyway, I leaned over the bed, and I looked under it to make sure it wasn't one of them, although I could hear them in the other room. And there's nothing under the bed. And then that spool of thread just comes darting out. And so I'm screaming for my brothers and my sister. And finally, my brother Jeff, he comes to the door, doesn't enter the room. What do you want, Debbie? I'm like, go get Mom. And finally she comes upstairs, and she's like, what? And the spool of thread at this time had rolled and stopped in front of the door. And so I said, that spool of thread has been running, zipping all over the room by itself. And she's like, well, maybe the cat's... No, there's no cat in the room. Well, the vibration from the music, from acoustic guitars. I had been reading on that bed for maybe an hour before all this started. And they didn't get louder. So I don't know. But my mom was always trying to explain things away so we wouldn't be scared. So anyway, she picks the thread up. I jump off the bed, and that was the end of that incident. But we had a lot of stuff. Like, there's so much. I could tell you so much more, but I don't want this to go on forever. And as I said, my dad didn't believe in ghosts. And then my mom and I started, we got the Ouija board out. And I know the Ouija board's got a bad rap, right? But it's because it's a very powerful tool to the spirit world. We treat it like a game. It's not a game. So you're going to use something like that, use it properly, and make sure you protect yourself and that you state your intentions. And so when we did it, our intentions were to contact the spirits in the house. And what do you want? And we found out there were 5 spirits, and one of them was bad. And there was one spirit named Daniel, said he was there to protect us from the bad spirit. And so that's how we learned we learned names and stuff. And my mom was able to verify a lot of stuff that came through the Ouija board through looking up history of the house. And so anyway, we got so attached to that board, my dad got annoyed, and finally he took it away from us and burned it in the burn barrel. And then not long after that, Daddy started getting his own experiences. Not only the doors and opening and lights coming on, but, he would feel something, nudge him at night. He'd think it's my mom, and then, he'd roll over and she's rolled away from him and it wasn't her. Or he'd think it was a cat had landed on him. One night he said he felt like something had landed on him and he thought it was the cat. And he opened his eyes and there's nothing on the bed. And then it started playing with his clock radio, which he used as an alarm clock, because then his radio station would go off at midnight and come back on at 6. So he used it as his alarm clock. And it would randomly go to other stations in the middle of the night. So now he knows that there's something else there. And once he accepted it, then it was like, time to move. And so we moved a couple of miles up the road. And the night we moved into our new house, I remember we felt so relieved. We thought, yay, we're not in a haunted house anymore. And my brother and I are watching a movie, and all of a sudden the blender in the kitchen came on full blast. And my mom comes running out, what's that? We're like, the blender. She's like, well, it must be Daniel letting us know that he knows where we are. And, we were okay with that because we weren't scared of Daniel. And the only other incident that happened in that new house was one time the gas stove came on by itself, and another time the faucet came on by itself. I think those 3 things are the only thing that happened there. And I don't know if it was just a Daniel saying hi. I have no idea. That's the thing about the spirit world and dealing with ghosts. You just don't always know why they're doing what they do. So that's a lot of what I have encountered there. In future blog posts, I'll tell you a little bit more about some other things. But this first post is just to tell you why I believe in the paranormal, some of my experiences with ghosts. And the next time that I do this, I'm going to talk a little bit about, maybe a little bit more about the Ouija board. When I got into automatic writing, which is another form of spirit contact, and then I got into some channeling. And we're going to talk about that in the future posts that I do. So I hope you join me. Subscribe to my vlog, and if you're interested to hear more, leave comments if you want me to discuss something, or you have something to share as well that we can talk about maybe in a future blog post. And let's do this. Let's go on this journey together and talk about the paranormal and other mystical related phenomena. And I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.